everyone. My name is Hady Raphael, and this week on this show, CF Montreal will play against Pumas Unam and DC United in the new Leagues Cup. Canada Soccer unveils its plans for the 2023 Canadian Championship. Week two of the training camp is under wraps as the team prepares itself for the 2023 season. That and a lot more on episode 115 of The Ball is Round. And of course, I meant episode 116 of the Ball is Round because we did 115 last time. Hey, Elias, I'm joined today by Elias Corgoriades, that you know is now a permanent member of the show, at least for a little while, hopefully for a long, long time. Hey, Elias, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good, Hattie. Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's good to be back to the
Yeah,
every week.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun today. So if anybody is asking about Eve, unfortunately she had to miss today's episode, but there's a slight possibility that she joins us during the show. So hopefully we'll see her pretty soon if everything is okay. First of all, Elias, before we start, unfortunately, we had some unfortunate news. We just want to say to send our thoughts to here on the Ball is Round to the family of Anton Walks that tragically passed away in a boat accident in Miami this week. Walks was only 25 years old and played his youth soccer with Tottenham Hotspurs before making the jump to MLS with Atlanta United, but also playing with Charlotte FC. He also played with Portsmouth in England, and he was still in contract with Charlotte FC, as I said earlier. We will unfortunately not see him anymore on the pitch as he's gone right now. So always tough these situations, Elias, right?
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And again, all my love to his family, his friends, his close ones. George Campbell, who plays for CF Montreal now, is a former teammate of his. I'm sure he's taking it very hard, but it's terrible because again, MLS is still a relatively small league, right? And it feels like a lot of the players that have moved around have formed this community, and it's terrible to see someone gone at such a young age. And our thoughts and our prayers are with him and his family.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully, we won't see that too often. It's been
Yeah,
a rough beginning of the season for all soccer lovers. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the passing of the great Pelé, now Anton Mox. So hopefully, we'll get a better year in the next, better news in the next few weeks. Let's talk about everything on the pitch. Let's talk about CF Montreal, of course, because
let's.
we're here to talk about CF Montreal, of course.
We are, yeah.
Um, exactly. So, first of all, a few announcements from the MLS and in and around the league with the newly formed Leagues Cup groups. Montreal is drawn with Pumas Unam from Liga MX and DC United. The club, so CF Montreal, will play two games in the group phase. So no, you won't have home and away games. So it's going to be two games altogether. And the top two clubs will qualify for next round. The League Cup is not to be taken lightly, as the top three teams will be directly qualified for the 2024 Champions League. And we all know how much we love that.
Yes.
Elias, we never had the chance to hear your thoughts regarding this new competition. I know you were lost at one point about the competition. What do you think about it now that we know a bit more about that competition?
Yeah, I mean, I've since looked into the competition and actually learned how it works, and it's a nice initiative, right? It's meant to promote more of North American clubs, not rather than just like the elite few that ends up in the Champions League. It's meant to be a more widespread competition. It's also made to maybe increase MLS's profile because Liga MX is still considered one of the top leagues, at least west of the Atlantic Ocean, and one of the top leagues west of the Atlantic. So it's good to see MLS competing in these types of tournaments, these types of competitions at the high level with teams that regularly make the Club World Cup. So that's a good step forward. And it's another step into the CONCACAF Champions League, which is, especially for Canadian clubs, has become very difficult to break into because their only way in is winning the Canadian Championship. The top teams in MLS do make the CONCACAF Champions League, but that's reserved for American teams. The Canadian clubs aren't recognized in that situation. So this being another avenue is definitely a welcomed development for the three Canadian MLS clubs who could see this as a potential new way to kind of maybe reorganize their focus. And if the season's not going so well and the Canadian Championship is over, there's a third tournament to focus on where you can not only get some silverware, get some international exposure, but also have a new tournament to play in next year.
Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting, and it's funny that you're talking about this because yes, you have now quite a few ways of qualifying for the Champions League. So we were talking about the Leagues Cup right now, but also starting this year, we're able to qualify through the leagues through the MLS standings. That wasn't possible for Canadian
Yeah.
teams in the past, so that's a new thing. So if you are either the Eastern champion, the Western champion, or if you win the Supporter Shield, or if you win the MLS Cup, you're automatically qualified for next year Champions League, and that's new for Canadian teams. And let's not forget with the new format of the Champions League in 2024, also for the Canadian Premier League. So the champion of the Canadian Premier League will be qualified also to the Champions League. So very exciting for Canadian clubs. 2023. It's the beginning of a new era for Canadian soccer, and we've been saying that for quite a while. But it's
Yeah.
still exciting to see all those avenues for Canada, for Canadian teams, for sure. But let's take a good look at CF Montreal opponents. First, so of course, the Liga MX club, Pumas, UNAM. There's a lot of people that think that it's a university. It's not anymore. It's one of the biggest clubs in Liga MX and in Mexico. So it's called Club Universidad Nacional. Sorry, I don't have the accent that goes with it. It was originally an amateur club of college students from the university. And then it developed into a professional team competing in the Mexican Football League. It is, as I said, one of the biggest club in Mexico right now. And it has evolved as the most popular as one of the most popular Mexican teams, and it has gained also an international following. The team's blue and gold color were selected as a tribute to the University of Notre Dame in the U.S., whose coaches helped to develop an American-style football team at the university. Domestically, Punas UNAM has won 11 trophies, so 7 Liga MX, one Copa MX, the Campeón de Campeones twice, so that's also in competition in Mexico, and the abolished Interamericana once, and of course the Segunda Division de Mexico. Um, of course, they won also 3 CONCACAF Champions Cups, so not the Champions League, but
Yeah.
the former format of the Champions League in CONCACAF. They were also the finalists last year in the 2022 CONCACAF Champions League, where they lost against Seattle, against the Sounders 5-2. There are a lot of good players that have worn the shirt of Pumas UNAM. Just to name a few, the legends Hugo Sanchez, Jorge Campos, or Claudio Suarez, all homegrowns for the club. So completely like formed by Pumas UNAM. And of course, last year, Dani Alves, that we all know, was playing for also
Yeah.
for Pumas. Of course, now he's in prison, but still. Thought Elias on this opponent, a big fish for CF Montreal, right?
Yeah, it's going to be again, if in terms of a formal competitive setting, it's going to be one of the biggest clubs to ever play at Saputo Stadium, I believe. So it's going to be very interesting to see, um, how the club tackles a challenge like this. But also, I'm very excited to see how many Puma supporters are going to come to Montreal, because we know they have a very loyal, very dedicated following, and anyone who follows CONCACAF know that Mexican soccer fans don't take it lightly. So it'll be interesting to see just how rowdy and just how animated the visitors section gets in the stands, and it's going to be obviously a great game. Pumas has kind of had a rocky go of it in Liga MX over the past few years, but they are trending upwards. You know, they have a very strong, they're very strong going forward. It's more so consistently defending that they've struggled with. But it's going to be a very interesting battle. It's going to be one of the games that I'm going to have circled on my calendar for sure. Just because of the status, and because
Of
it's also
course.
a new competition, which is going to be again, always intriguing. It'll be a new competition against DC United too, but DC United is already a team Montreal plays against, so it's not going to be as I don't think it's going to be as enticing. But having a Mexican club of that stature come here, and we had two of them visit we had one team visit last year in the Champions League, and so having another one, it's just going to be again all around exciting. And this time it'll be at Stat Saputo instead of Olympic Stadium, so it'll be a
We'll
much different
see.
ambiance.
We'll see. We don't have the draw yet, so maybe we'll be the ones going to Pumas and playing there, right? Because we're playing two games. So
I thought Montreal was hosting the games
both? I'm not
as
sure.
a top seed. I thought as a
Oh
top seed in the
yeah,
group they were going to host the games.
you're right. You're right. Yeah, you're right. You're
So
right. Yeah. So they should. They should.
so
Ah,
it'll be
you're right,
very
Elias.
interesting.
Sorry. Yeah,
I
it's gonna
told
be
you
very
I did
interesting.
I looked up the league, the League's Cup. I told you I
That's a
looked it
mistake
up.
on my part, man. That's a mistake on my part. But you know what, man? I'm gonna correct you on one thing though.
What's
You
that?
said the biggest club that plays at Saputo in an official game because we did have AS Roma come to
I
Saputo
meant in like
and
in an actual competitive match, like
exactly
in
as
terms
an
of
official game.
friendlies and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean Milan's played here, PSG's played here, Roma's like that. That's
Exactly.
a different category. That's a different class, right?
Now
I'm talking
PSG is
about.
not a good club, so PSG is a small
Oh
club,
yes,
so we
I
don't
forgot
really
who I'm
talk
talking
about
to.
them,
I forgot
right?
who I'm
So
talking to. That's true.
no, but yeah, it's gonna be very exciting. I completely agree, and yes, I'm gonna circle that game on my calendar for sure. It's not like I do miss games, so I rarely miss games at Saputo, but this one I'm gonna be very happy
Yeah.
to have a look at it and to be in the stands. That's completely sure. Now, you talked a bit about the second opponent that we're used to. It's none other than DC United, the former club of Hernando Losada, which is very
Yeah,
funny.
that'll be very interesting.
It's going to stand in the way of CF Montreal. For those that don't really know the story and the history of DC United, four-time MLS Cup champion, three times US Open Cup champion, winner of the CONCACAF Champions Cup in 1998, so before the new format, and winner also one time of the Copa Interamericana the same year in 1998. Famous players that have worn the DC United shirt are prolific goal scorer and Bolivian legends Jaime Moreno, Marco Echeverri, who was a great player. U.S. national players like Eddie Pope, Jeff Agus, John Harkes, Ben Olsen, amongst others. There's a lot of them that played. Bill Hamid, too many good players played there. Canadian legend Dwayne De Rosario also played there, and more recently, none other than the current head coach Wayne Rooney. What do you think about this opponent, Elias?
They're definitely not going to be bottom feeders this year. They've gotten a pretty big facelift, especially up front. They have Tachifuntas, who's a Greek international, as you know, but they also have Christian Benteke, who's been a bona fide Premier League star, right? So there's a lot of experience and there's a lot of firepower, which was definitely helpful for a team that was last place in goals scored last year, and they were, consistently the worst, if not like the bottom two or three teams in the league at any given moment in terms of their record and their standing. So this is a team that should not be taken lightly, obviously. They've brought in a lot of new players. So I think Wayne Rooney's starting to finally, you know, take the reins. He didn't really have much to do. There was the issue with his visa, and then coming in halfway through the season, he missed a couple of games even when he was head coach. So he's now had a full off season to kind of immerse himself in, you know, turning the club into what his vision is. And so I'm very excited to see how he approaches the game. He was, as a player, Wayne Rooney's brand is very distinct, and you know exactly what you're going to get from Wayne Rooney on the pitch. As a manager with Derby, it was a bit. he was very flexible, and he did manage to do great in an organization that wasn't, in a very good place, and that ended up going to administration, and they got the points docked and the relegation. So having him at a bit more stable club, don't know how much more stable DC is, but it's definitely more stable than Derby, and to let him kind of let him impose himself on a sporting project is going to be very exciting, because just by their acquisitions in this offseason, they definitely mean business. So I don't know if they're going to be challenging for the top of the East or for a playoff spot or anything like that, but they definitely won't be cannon fodder for the rest of the league. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and a lot of new faces also with DC United, right?
Yeah.
For CF Montreal followers that we all know there's no love lost between CF Montreal and Rouen. So Rouen is a new DC United player, so we're gonna see him a bit more than usual. We have the former LA Galaxy central defender Derek Williams, the Irish defender. That's also a very good player. You have as a goalkeeper, yes, you don't have anymore Bill Hamid, but you do have Alex Bono, former TFC
Yep.
goalkeeper, and you have Tyler Miller, so the former Minnesota United and LAFC goalkeeper. So I wonder who's going to be the starting goalkeeper. In the midfield, there's some really good players. Former EPL player Ravel Morrison, former Manchester United player, of course, in the middle of the pitch. Pedro Santos, the former Columbus Crew winger, who's going to be very important. You talk about Funtas, you talk about Benteke. There's so many good players in that team. So hopefully, CF Montreal and the fact that the team hasn't changed much is going to play in our favor, because the opponent has a brand new squad to play with. And I don't know if it's going to take them time to really understand the teachings of Wayne Rooney, or if the teachings are going to be uh, ever understood. So we'll see. We'll see if it's going to work for Wayne Rooney. Let's talk about that competition, Elias. Okay. A lot of people are saying that the calendar is going to be too. There's going to be too many games. Do you think that this is a bit too much for the calendar of CF Montreal and other MLS teams?
I think it's becoming a trend everywhere that there's more and more fixtures, there's more and more competitions added, and it's becoming increasingly dense schedule. And I think that a lot of players are starting to get a little, maybe not annoyed, but a little more concerned just with the constant usage that their body's going through. A lot of players that are used to playing, uh, 2 or 3 games a week was a rarity, like once or twice in a season. Now it's happening once or twice a month. And I understand there's concern on that front, right? There was all kinds of backlash from players when just asking for a World Cup in the winter, because the logistical nightmare that caused for a lot of European clubs that basically had a week off in between World Cup and their season ending, going to the World Cup, and then again there was a week between the World Cup ending and the season starting. So I understand that fixture congestion can cause a lot of problems, and you saw how many people got injured, right? So I think this is another case where squad depth is going to become extremely vital, which shows that, like, so some of the additions that Montreal made to their squad may not be starters, but will definitely improve the squad depth. I am still concerned with the fact that a lot of players will be getting a lot of minutes, and the likelihood of injuries just goes up, especially just sheer wear and tear injuries, right? Maybe nothing dramatic, but muscle pulls and just knocks that continuously, they accumulate, and then all of a sudden, you need time off. And I forget who it was. I think it was Aaron Herrera. I don't want to attribute the quote to the wrong person. I think it was Aaron Herrera or Joe Waterman that spoke at CF Montreal train this week, talking about the League's Cup, saying it's nice to have a bit of a break in July, but that break is gone now, right? So I believe it was Aaron Herrera, and yeah, I mean, they're obviously excited for a new competition and new challenge, but at the same time, their athletes competing at the highest level, they need to rest their bodies as well. So this kind of takes away that, because instead of maybe scheduling a rest, like 2 rest days, and then continue to train for a game on the weekend, all of a sudden you have 1 rest day or no rest days because you have to get ready for another match. So there are drawbacks. It's nice to see that the game in North America is expanding, but at the same time, you have to take care of your players, and this could cause some complications.
I understand. Now, CF Montreal has been very good with depth, and we've seen it last season where even when Montreal was had a lot of injuries, there was always someone that came up and was able to fill in
Yeah.
to that injured player. This year, it seems like almost the same. We have yes, we have young players for sure, but you look at the squad and you're like, it looks like we're kind of set for any kind of injury that we could have. Do you agree with that?
I mean, it's like we spoke about on I think last week. Still looking a little bit thin at the striker position, looking a little bit thin up top.
Yeah,
But in terms
yeah.
of virtually every other position, you're right. There is at least one for every like one sub for every single spot, which is a welcomed fact in the club. So their depth is improving, and you see the people that they bring in are for that exact purpose. Like I said before, it's to make sure that rotations don't have that much a toll on the actual product they end up putting on the field. Now with Kai Kamara and the whole trade saga and everything like that, and then 04 over in Belgium that could have his loan recalled. That's a whole thing to consider. But again, the only place where depth is or could be an issue is up top, because we know about Mason Toy's injury history, we know about Romel Kyoto's injury history, so that could turn into a bit of a headache, especially with a team that throughout last season did have a bit of a hard time consistently scoring goals. They would score, like 3 or 4 goals, and then they'd go 2 games where they could barely get one. So a lack of depth could make that a bit of a sore spot. But other than that, you're right. It's an extremely deep squad, and it's extremely versatile squad. I just think that they do need to bring in some reinforcements up top.
Let's wait and see what's going to happen with CF Montreal. But
Yeah.
before that, let's go back to Leagues Cup. For you, are we going to see an MLS team win the League Cup, or do you think that Liga MX club will win the Leagues Cup? Who's the favorite? Is it an MLS, a Canadian American team, or is it a Mexican team?
I think it all depends on how how the competition gets prioritized, right? Because clubs approach each competition differently, right? Like American clubs may say we have the Champions League and the US Open and MLS, so we have to kind of put certain eggs into certain baskets, and something may end up just not being as focused on, right? People will never not take the Champions League as the main priority. It's the Champions League, it's a potential route to the Club Cup. And the MLS is obviously your league, right? So sometimes the US Open is kind of seen as a chance to give your rotational players a chance. Same thing happened with CF Montreal last year, right? The game against Forge had a massive amount of squad rotation. We finally got to see Sunusi Ibrahim play. So it'll depend. It all depends to see how seriously they take it. Again, MLS does have a lot of quality in it, but a lot of the bigger teams sometimes struggle with squad depth.
Yeah,
So if they
I
end up
agree.
saying, the US Open is a priority and the US Open is our best chance of getting into the Champions League, we already have the Champions League and the MLS, then yeah, the League's Cup is nice and it would be cool. But at the end of the day, we already have 3 competitions we're focusing on. Or maybe vice versa, right? They have a tough draw in the US Open, but their League's Cup draw is a bit more favorable. So say, all right, the League's Cup, we're going all in on that, or that's how we're trying to get into the Champions League, and then the US Open will be the one where they kind of place reserves or they have bring in some youth players. So I think that Liga MX probably has an advantage in that way, where they're a bit more used to juggling different fixtures and different competitions. But I think that MLS clubs have just enough quality, and you saw it last year's Champions League, where 3 of them made it into the quarterfinals. There's a lot of quality in MLS, and it would not be a surprise at all if they not only made a push for the League's Cup title, but they won it.
Yeah, it's I think it's for me it's important to have that competition just in order to close the gap between Mexican teams and American teams, North American teams. I think it's going to be very important because Champions League is not enough. playing every week, or playing more often against those teams is going to be very important. So that I'm kind of excited for it. But I agree with you, because when you look at squad depth in MLS, just look at the salaries for the players on the
Yeah.
bench. It's maybe 3 or 4 times more. Like, the bench players make 3 or 4 times more in Liga MX than in MLS. It's as
Yeah.
simple as that. That's where the quality shifts. It's the quality on the bench. On the bench, there's a lot more quality on the bench for Liga MX team than for MLS teams. It's going better, with the whole the new convention with the MLS, increasing the salary cap from one year to another. So I think it's going to go better, but I think there's still a few steps before we're on par with the Mexican
Yeah.
League. But I think that Leagues Cup helps us, maybe just shorten the gap
Bridge the
a
gap a
bit.
little bit.
So
Yeah.
bridge the gap a bit better. So hopefully we'll see an MLS teams go through. Of course we will, because it's the groups of three teams. I was looking at all the groups right now. So I'm just gonna give you just I don't have the image, unfortunately, so I'm just gonna say them. Um, Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna find the image. If you give me a few minutes, I will get you the image. Usually I'm prepared, but not this time. Um, so yeah, so we have quite a few groups, and as I said, it's groups of three, and the top two groups will qualify. So it's kind of interesting to see that. Sorry about that. Okay, so I can't find the image. So first of all, you have a bye for the champions of Liga MX, so Pachuca, and the champions of MLS Cup, so LAFC, for the first round. You have three groups in the West with Tigres, Portland Timbers, San Jose forming the first group. Monterrey, Real Salt Lake, Seattle Sounders forming the second, and LA Galaxy, Club Leon, and Vancouver Whitecaps forming the third. In Central, you have America, so Club America, Columbus Crew, and St. Louis forming the first group. Puebla, Minnesota United, Chicago Fire forming the second. Chivas, FC Cincinnati, and Kansas City with the third. Nashville, Toluca, and Rapids with the fourth. In the South, you have Austin, Mazatlan, and Juarez with one group. Santos Laguna, Orlando City, and Houston Dynamo with the second. Cruz Azul, Inter Miami, and Atlanta United with the third. FC Dallas, Necaxa, and Charlotte FC with the third. And in the East, you have four groups: Union, Tijuana, Querétaro. Uh, Second group, CF Montreal, Pumas, DC United. Third, New York City FC, Atlas, Toronto FC. And last but not least, the Red Bulls with Atletico de San Luis and New England Revolution. Knowing that there's going to be two teams that qualify to the next round, we only have two groups while you have two Liga MX team and one MLS
Yeah.
teams. And the two groups are the South one group with Austin, Mazatlan, and Juarez, and the East one group with Union, Tijuana, and Querétaro. It's going to be interesting to see if the MLS club is going to be able to qualify and leave one team of the Liga MX behind. Do you think that's going to be possible?
I mean, yeah, I mean, anything is possible, especially if it's two games,
Of
right? The
course.
the, the, the fewer games, the more likely you get an upset. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see uh, just how far some of these MLS teams go, especially since most of the groups have guaranteed at least one. Austin FC had a really great team last year and proved
Yeah.
not only to be very good with the ball, but very difficult to beat. Right, every single team that went into Austin or played against Austin, even if they were on the road, found it very difficult to play their game, and Austin was very good at dictating what kind of game it was going to end up being. So a team like Austin could end up, despite being 2-1, if you will, with the two Liga MX teams, they can make life very difficult and kind of play their own game. So I think that, how good you are at imposing your style on other teams, especially teams that you don't know well, is going to be one of the most crucial parts of it. So teams that, even if they're playing at home, teams that are good on the road naturally are better at imposing their style, because that's how you win on the road. You don't just, submit and then hope for the best on the road, and that's not how you find sustained success. But away teams that do have success, like Montreal last year, were able to go into opposing teams' stadiums and do what they do best. So that's going to be the key when you're playing against teams you're not familiar with. So yeah, you'll get a scouting report, and yeah, you'll watch game tape. It's not the same as playing against them on the field, and you understand the
Of course,
tendencies and
of course.
everything like that. So
And the form,
these,
the form of each
yeah,
player, right? Because
form is
sometimes
also super
you're
important. Yeah,
down, sometimes players are not in a good place, and the team is not in a good place. Morale plays its role also. So there's a lot of
yeah,
factors to know if it's possible or not. But I think it's going to be interesting. Looking at those two groups. I would be surprised to see Philadelphia Union get knocked out from the first round. I would be very,
yes,
very
that's also true.
surprised.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Austin, is it gonna is it was 2022 a one-off year where they were very good, and are we gonna see them, not be as good this year? That's gonna be interesting to see if the coach Wolf is going to be able to keep that consistency and keep that level of play throughout a second season. That's going to be interesting for the former expansion team that will play their third, sorry, a season in 2023. So I think interesting competition. There's a lot of storylines here there that could be very interesting for
Yeah.
people that are asking in Leagues Cup. The competition will be played between July 21st and August 19th. So there will be a break off during there will be a break from MLS in order to have that tournament. So one thing is kind maybe some teams are going to say, what, let's get knocked out very soon and get a couple of weeks rest so that we put everything, all our forces into MLS afterwards, the second part of MLS. So that could be a strategy too. So let's wait and see how it unfolds. Let's move on with our next topic, Elias. So we have
Yeah.
the 2023 Canadian Championship.
Yes.
The tournament will kick off on April 18th, 2023, the earliest start date ever for that competition. This year, 14 clubs with three first-time participants. First of all, the new expansion team in the Canadian Premier League, Vancouver FC, that will be a part of this. The League One BC will be qualified. The champions will be qualified, which is TSS Rovers FC. We know that club. I think Joel Waterman was played for that
Yeah.
club a few years ago. And of course, the new champions of the PLSQ, FC Laval,
C'est Laval. Yeah.
who will play their first time for the first time ever in that Canadian Championship. Looking at a Canadian Championship that went from at one point it was 6 teams to now
Yeah.
14 teams. What does that mean for Canadian soccer, in your opinion?
It's only good. It's only good things, right? I mean, you're starting to see an actual pyramid for Canadian soccer evolve, right? And that's the way to grow the game, is to kind of have this pyramid and this idea of, there may not be scales for promotion yet and movement between the levels of this pyramid, but you're starting to see, you know, clubs feeding into other clubs, which are feeding into other clubs, which is how countries develop and how national programs develop, right? So you see at the provincial level the teams that are feeding into the CPL, which then lead into MLS, which is Joe Waterman's exact path, right? He went from U Sports and semi-pro in BC into the Canadian Premier League. He got drafted, and then he ended up in Montreal. So it's progressions like that where you develop talent in house, and it's only going to improve. And yes, Canada is in the midst of a golden generation, and they have all this world class talent at the national team level. But if you want to develop sustained growth and sustained quality in your national program, and not just hope for a once in a generation group of players, this is how it's done, right? You can't just ship all your players off to other countries and then hope you find some kind of cohesion, because that's rarely the case. So if you are able to have a credible and high quality competition and high quality programs that feed into this competition, then you're going to be developing more players and better players in your own country, which is just better overall for the unity of the national team and the unity of the program. So I'm excited to see just how far some of these new arrivals can go. We saw that um, PLSQ teams have been known to cause an upset, have been known to make some of the higher up teams' lives difficult. So it'll be nice to see what FC Laval does. It's their first time here. They're a newly formed club, right? Because Laval
Yeah.
was splintered into a dozen or so organizations, and now there's two. So FC Laval was the one that ended up winning PLSQ, and it's going to be very cool to see just how far they can go, and just how they can kind of fly the flag for semi-professional soccer still being at a very high level. And you have some former professional players that play in PLSQ, so in Blainville and in
Yeah.
MRO and in Laval. So it's going to be Blainville, obviously, um, one of the more consistently successful teams in that league, and who's featured in the Canadian Championship many times. So it'll be nice to see that we're going to have a proper tournament and a proper footballing hierarchy in the country very soon. That's not just MLS teams beat up on the CPL, who beat up on the provincial teams, and then you have a final three basically of which MLS team wins the Canadian Championship. And I'm looking forward to the day where a CPL team ends up really putting together a consistent run of not just like beating one MLS team once every like couple of years, but consistently becomes a
Yeah.
threat in this tournament, right? Where they become almost like specialists at dethroning these big clubs and making the tournament their own. So that'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, but also it's interesting to
Yeah.
see, new teams, winning their provincial tournaments. I think that's going to be nice because it gives them a taste of what it takes. It gives the players a taste of what it takes to be professional, and I think that's going to be
Yeah.
very, very important. You talked about the fact that we're starting to see a pyramid, but also I think that the players are going to realize what they need to do in order to progress,
Yeah.
and that's going to be, I think, very interesting. But also you're looking at now the provincial teams, and you're starting to see some teams in a way show their worth with I think the winner of the League One Ontario being a team. I think it's Vaughan, if I'm not mistaken, that
Yes.
has participated in the past also in Canadian Championship. Do you think that at one point you're going to see the same teams coming back every year because of that exposure that they're getting and that experience that they're getting every time that they participate? We've seen this with PLSQ with Blainville, I think,
Yeah.
participating twice. So do you
Yeah.
think that's going to be a trend that you're going to have juggernauts in the provincial leagues too?
I mean, I think there already are juggernauts. I think just they're going to get more exposure. And I mean, that's one thing that if they're going to be getting all this exposure and coincidentally like an influx of cash, you're going to have to start investing even more into these leagues, because or else you're just going to have one team that runs away with it, and you don't want a bunch of like little mini Bundesliga or League Erns popping up around the country where there's no real competition, and it's just Vaughan or Blainville or Laval, who did it this year, that just run the table and end up being that country's like almost de facto representative, because they'll have more power recruiting, and then so it increases the gap even more, and it's just a vicious cycle. It's nice to see that Canada Soccer is taking this seriously, and they're really investing into the championship, and they're expanding it. I hope it keeps on expanding. I hope it goes to the point where multiple teams from each provincial league will get the chance, and not just the champion. You could have the champion, the runner up, or make it like the top three, and you start expanding it even more so, right? Because even there's a reason that the FA Cup is one of the most popular tournaments in the world,
Yeah,
club tournaments in the world. It's
yeah,
because of those Cinderella stories, right? I'd love to see
yes.
teams from, League One BC or Ontario or PLSQ go up against TFC, or like imagine Lorenzo Insigne going to the park in Mont Royal and playing, right? Something
That
like
could be
that,
nice.
right?
That could be
They
nice.
would sell it out instantly. It would be it's
Yeah,
an incredible opportunity for all these clubs, and limiting it to just one isn't the best. So I hope that they keep on investing in the tournament, because that's the
yeah,
only way to continue growth, right? To continue to grow the sport and continue to grow this pyramid we're talking about is only happens by continuously investing in the clubs, right?
yeah.
Because
I
some of them
agree.
do sell tickets, but even at that, it's not going to be enough to fund complete restructuring and becoming a challenger on the national scale. The federation needs to continue what they're doing, because this is a good step forward. Now you have to build on this, because this is going to be a very exciting tournament. And I hope that we have a really fun tournament that's not too predictable. I hope we see a lot of upsets, because it's just going to, it's going to enable Canada Soccer to expand it even more. We have it 14 teams now. Let's have it, let's make it a goal to make it 20 by 2030, for example, right? Let's keep on looking to expand this tournament every year, look to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, because it just means more money into these smaller clubs, is more money into these community organizations. And that's at the end of the day, that's where all this talent starts. It's in the community organizations, right? Even the academies take their players from local community clubs.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Canada Soccer has to ride this momentum, and they have to continue, enabling all these other clubs to really step up and become noteworthy.
Yeah, I completely and I agree with you. And if they wanted, if they want to give more chance and to make sure that we have those Cinderella stories, that could be nice to eliminate the buys in the first round. Uh,
Yeah,
Again, this year the draw is going to be made on the 31st of January. It's going to be, of course, broadcasted on One Soccer. But the Whitecaps, the winners of last year tournament, and TFC being finalists, receive buys into the second round. And for me, this is not the way to go. You know what? This is a new season. You don't have a privilege. You start from scratch. You start from scratch. This is what the cup means, right? And in all countries, I've never seen that. I've never seen someone, sometimes you see a few clubs like in France. You have a few clubs, all the European, the clubs that qualified for European competitions, they start maybe one round later. Okay, but
yeah.
that's not one or two clubs. That's like seven or eight clubs. And that's, I kind of understand that. But for me, it has to be everyone starts the first round and may the best win.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. You're not
especially
going to give an
especially a tournament this
advantage.
size. Yeah,
Exactly. You're not going to give an advantage to someone that has already won and already has an advantage of participating in a Champions League. That's too many advantages. So that for me is a bit. I just don't like that. But in order to do that, they had to maybe add a couple more clubs to make it 16 clubs. And I think that politically it's going to be very tough to add two clubs because you have three provincial leagues. So
yeah.
there's one that's going to be left behind, and for me that's unfair too. So I kind of understand where Canada Soccer stands, and the predicament that they find themselves in, but yeah,
You
they
could
need to
have the
fix that.
runners up of the three leagues. Like you can have the runners up of the three leagues have a playoff for the last two spots, and there you go. You have 16 teams and
That
you're ready.
Yeah, that could be nice. Yeah, that could be nice. You start with the play in. Yeah, you can start the year with
Yeah,
the play in. Yeah,
right. So
so yeah,
three teams
yeah,
have to qualify for two spots, and then everyone else you have 16 teams, and everything's rounded out, and you get going.
yeah.
But
Canada Soccer is
yeah,
gonna call
it's
you,
good to
Elias.
see. Hey,
Can-
let them know my Twitter DMs are open, so get in touch with me and we'll sort it out.
Yeah, so Dr. Bontes, Elias is here, and
You
yeah,
know where to
so
find
I'm
me.
pretty sure he's gonna be able to help you for sure. Um, Now, we talked about the multiple ways for Canadian clubs to qualify for the Champions League. Knowing that you have the way of the league with the MLS. You knowing that you
Mhm.
have the league's cup, does it diminish the importance of the Canadian Championship in your opinion? Because before it was the only way to qualify for the Champions League.
I don't think it diminishes it because again, at least for MLS teams, this is still their best shot at making the Champions League. You have to be one of the four best teams in MLS to qualify in that route, or you have to be one of the best teams in all of North America to qualify through the League's Cup. So I still think that the Canadian Championship is the easiest route for the three of the big clubs. So I don't think they'll be taking it lightly at all. It's also a Canadian championship. And for those three clubs, it's still not a small thing. It's in a world where for Canadian MLS clubs, silverware is scarce, scarce to non-existent for a lot of them outside of the Canadian championship. This is a big deal, right? A lot of them haven't won anything outside Canadian championship in years, right? Or like, the last time was Toronto who won the MLS Cup, but that was almost a decade ago. That
Why?
haven't won
Why do you
anything.
keep on reminding us that, Elias? We don't want to be reminded of that.
If I have friends and family from Toronto that remind me of it, then I'm gonna have to remind everybody else so they can suffer with me. But that's just the thing, right? This is still the best chance at silverware that the Canadian clubs will have. So it's still going to be taken very seriously, and I still think it's going to be a priority for the clubs. And I don't think that'll go away. I think it's nice to have, silver lining if they do lose the Canadian Championship. There's other routes for them to have another tournament next season, have another high profile tournament next season. But at the end of the day, the Canadian Championship is still one that all three MLS clubs look towards as, we are the best team in Canada and nobody could take that away from us no matter what. So I think that they'll still be taking it very seriously, and I still think that's going to be right up there with every other competition as a priority.
Interesting. I kind of agree with you, but I know that some clubs have like see, you know, like in a way prioritize one championship in front of the other or one league in front of the other,
Hmm.
looking at the financials behind it or looking
Yeah.
at the prestige behind it. And it's of course a lot more prestigious to win the League's Cup than the Canadian Championship, even if the Canadian Championship has a lot of history and you're the best team in the country. But if you win the League's Cup, you're one of the best teams in North America. It's as simple as that. Or you're the best team in North America
Yeah.
anyway. So yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what the objectives are going to be for each one of the MLS clubs that will have all those opportunities. Um, Now let's take a look at CF Montreal for that Canadian Championship. Do you think that it's a true objective for the team? Do you think that this time CF Montreal it's one of their main objective to win the Canadian Championship?
Absolutely. I think they still have a chip on their shoulder from the way they crashed out last year.
Yeah.
Not only to your rivals, but also just the way that a 4-0 route, no matter what, is a bad news to your rivals
Uh,
and in the Canadian Championship is just compounding the pain. So I think that they definitely have a massive chip on their shoulder, and I think that they're definitely going to attack that tournament with even more gusto than they did last year. They were defending champions last year, and they kind of maybe took their foot off the gas and didn't give it the respect it deserved, and they kind of paid for it. So this year, I think that they kind of were shocked into remembering that this is still a high level tournament and they could still crash out at any moment, and that their silverware is right there for them to take it. They just have to show up. So I think that, before in preparation for Canadian Championship games, it will be the same level as an MLS playoff game. It'll be the same level as the League's Cup game. It will be, a big game that they're preparing for. Every game for them will be like a derby. And the way the players talk about winning silver or winning the Canadian Championship, you could tell that that is something that they haven't gotten over yet. And quite frankly, unless they beat Toronto in the same way, I don't think they will get over it until they either win that title or knock Toronto out. So I think that that's definitely a major sore spot because again, finishing second MLS is a massive in the East is a big accomplishment. Making it that far in the playoffs for the first time in a couple of years is a massive accomplishment. But the only place where they genuinely disappointed was in the Canadian Championship.
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that that's definitely going to be one thing they want to kind of fix from last year, or make up for from last year will be that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know what? Uh, I asked my question. I asked a question at one point, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, if I had to choose between the League's Cup or the Canadian Championship as a CF Montreal higher up, or as a CF Montreal coach, uh, which competition would I choose? And for me, the answer is very simple: it's the Canadian Championship, because of how much history there is between the club
Yeah,
and that competition. There's so much history for CF Montreal and the Canadian Championship. We see fans during the Canadian Championship. There there's um, an extra roar in the stadium. There's an extra, you feel that they want to believe that this could be our year. And I think that that's going to be very important. Winning a newly formed league like the League's Cup, yes, it's going to be nice, of course, but it doesn't have the weight of being the number
no,
one club in the country, which, as
yeah.
proud Canadians, we always want to be, and we always tend to. We tend to be the best in the country, and so for me, it's going to be the Canadian Championship that's going to be a priority along with MLS, and Leagues Cup is going to be we'll see how it goes. Do you agree with that or not really?
I think if I were part of the coaching staff, yes. But I think if I'm part of
Yeah,
the front office of the club that's probably worked with the league to kind of set this up, maybe they want a better Leagues Cup showing because of all
yeah,
the added publicity. But in terms
yeah,
of
that's true.
in the mind of maybe the supporters and the staff and the players, you're right because of the weight that and the history. So I think there may be a little bit of a disconnect there, but I think that I think for the fans at the very least, seeing Pumas come to Montreal and everything like that, and all these potentially massive and historic Mexican clubs coming to Montreal will be very nice. But the Canadian Championship is still the Canadian Championship, and that's still something that people will come out to watch, even if they're playing a semi-pro club from Laval, or if they're playing TFC or Whitecaps. It will be still a high profile and very important game.
Who do you want to draw in the first round?
Honestly, Montreal has had success and has had a difficult time against people on all levels. So I guess it depends on how healthy the squad is and where it lines up with their schedule. If there's some time, if there's some free time, then yeah, like get a higher level team that will force some of the first team players to kind of get together and play with one another, and they may not be too familiar with one another, and get them to play in a high level, high stakes competitive match early on in the season. That could very realistically be something that happens. On the same in the same way where if the early season isn't great and Losada wants to try something new, or wants to maybe try and rotate the squad a bit, and you're up against someone that's maybe a bit further down in the pyramid, it gives you the opportunity to do that without risking too much. So I'd love to see right off the bat like a big CPL team to kind of maybe get the blood flowing and jumpstart a title run. So I would like to see a proper competition right off the bat would be nice for Montreal.
If you had to choose a team, Elias, just choose one team, like
I'd love
one
to
team
see
that you want to see.
I'd love to see Forge come back to Montreal and kind of give them maybe like a bit of a rematch from last year. Uh, I love Bobby Spiniotis. I think he's a really good coach. I
Just
think
because
Forge
he's
is
Greek, right?
your words, not mine. Uh,
I'm
and I
joking. I'm
think that
joking.
and I think that just having again, one of if not the best team in CPL and CPL history coming to Montreal is just what they need to kind of jumpstart their title run. And maybe if, again, like I said, if it's a bit of a lull in the MLS season, maybe they're not in the best form, this will be a new fresh challenge to kind of maybe get some confidence, get the blood flowing, and maybe just right the ship. So I'd love
Yeah,
to
it's
see Forge
interesting.
again.
You know
That'd be a good
what?
matchup.
You know what? If I had to choose one team, I want to go to FC Laval at Parc Cartier and play FC Laval.
That
That's
would be
what I want
awesome.
to see.
That would be awesome.
First of all, I think that will be awesome for FC Laval. It's as simple as
Yes.
that. It's going to promote, that club. It's going to give them, of course, money with all the ticketing and the tickets that they're going to be able to sell. It's going to be nice to see professional players go, at a semi-professional venue and try to
Yeah.
win there. Um, and it's
Montreal
going to be
Laval
different
Derby,
for
which is
us.
awesome. Yeah.
Exactly. Go Montreal, which is awesome too because it's going to be interesting to go play there, and as a journalist, it's going to be nice for us to go there and to cover the club. There. I remember the first time I went to Blainville to watch a game. It was CF Montreal, but back then it was the Montreal Impact against Blainville, and that was really nice. No, it wasn't. Sorry, it was York. No. Yeah, it was York 9 FC
It was
against
York.
Blainville.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was York 9 FC in the time. It used to be called York 9 FC, now it's York United. It was fun to go to Blainville and to be, to watch the game there. So I hope that we're going to see the big club in Quebec play the smaller club in Quebec.
That'd be
Um,
cool.
I think it's going to be a nice storyline, and whoever wins, I'll be happy. Just to see a Quebec team
My
go
Laval friends will
go.
become even more insufferable if they actually pull that off. So
I don't have any
we'll see
Laval
what happens.
friends. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's gonna be fun. I think this year, I don't know. I have a gut feeling, and I feel this year the Canadian Championship is gonna be epic. I don't know why.
Yeah.
There's no logical explanation behind it, but I feel that it's gonna be epic this year. I don't know why. Do you have an explanation for me, or
I
it's
mean,
just me being
it's a
weird?
new tournament format. It's also a new tournament format, right? There's a lot of it shows that they're taking this tournament seriously, and it's not just okay, MLS teams go beat the CPL teams for and whatever and go win the tournament. It shows that they're taking this tournament seriously, and then they're taking this competition as something that should be at all levels of elite Quebec soccer. So there's a reason to be excited. It's because this is
Yeah,
starting to feel more and more like an actual championship and not just like an MLS parade. So I'm equally excited for you. I really want to see some major upsets. Except for
yeah.
Laval beating Montreal, I would just be unbearable.
Uh,
But other than that, yes, I'm welcome to every upset. We'll bring it on.
Let's wait and see. We can't wait for the January 31st. Of course, we'll talk about it here on the Ball is Round like we usually do. We cover all Canadian championships, the Canadian championships. We cover the national teams. We cover CF Montreal, of course. And talking about CF Montreal, Elias, week
Yeah,
2 of preseason is under
week two.
wraps. I didn't have the chance to go to training this week. Did you?
Yeah, I went twice, and is very stark contrast from week one. They're starting to accelerate now. We're seeing a lot more game situations. We're seeing a lot more it's past just getting to know one another and getting refamiliarized or meeting or getting used to the new players. This is now how well do you play together. We're seeing a lot of combinations. I saw especially like in the inter squad games, I saw George Campbell, Kawan Miller, and Victor Wanyama playing together. I saw Camacho, Waterman, and Torkelson playing together. So a lot of very interesting combinations. um Piet against Schwanyaya was very good because they were basically shoulder to shoulder the entire inter squad game. So Hernando Losada is definitely looking at as many different combinations as possible. I think very slowly but surely his starting 11, but also his tactical deployment is starting to form. I think he had some preconceived notions going into the into the camp, and he's adjusting as it goes along. But overall, it's a very good level of competition. You could tell that they want to keep the same kind of ball dominant, possession oriented play. That's the ball never leaves the ground. It's always just it's quick moving and it's stuck to the ground. So I think that in that aspect, for those who like the way Montreal played in the last 2 years, you're going to get a lot more of that. So it's encouraging to see because it seems like everyone is bought into that last year, and it seems like the new players fit that mold. Especially George Campbell and Aaron Herrera are both players that express enthusiasm with this style of play, and not just long balls or very direct. They love the new ones. George Campbell especially was raving because his biggest thing is I love being a ball playing center back, and that's like one of his best characteristics. He's very tall, he's imposing, but he's very good with his feet, and you saw it every time he had the ball. Nobody would rush him, right? Even if he was pressed, he would take a touch, turn, play the ball backwards, play it into Wanyama, play the ball to the defensive partner. So he seems very comfortable on the ball and very composed, and that's something obviously you need in a back three with very little safety net. And all in all, it seems to be chugging along nicely. They're starting up again tomorrow, and I hope that they accelerate even more now. We're start to see some real tactics involved, and see we'll get an even clearer idea of how Losada wants this team to play specifically, aside from just keep the ball.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun, I think, to
Yeah,
watch training. I've been waiting. I don't. I'm not sure. I think they still have 2 weeks. I think in Montreal
2 weeks.
before
Yeah, yeah,
they
they're
go
gone on the fourth.
to Miami. Yeah, exactly. So they
Yeah, they're
have
gone.
this week and
Yeah,
the week after. I know I want to go. I don't think I'm gonna go this week, but maybe next week I'll go a couple of times. I'll make sure to go a couple of times this week. It's gonna be pretty tough for me. But tell me about. First of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Kai Kamara came back to
yeah.
training. Tell me about the reactions of everybody. Of course, the press, the players. How was he received? Did you see any tension between him and the coach? Like, tell us all about it. We want to hear all about it.
He didn't really speak with Hernan that much. He was mostly working with the fitness specialists. He spent the entire training session with Mason Toy, who's also dealing with a knock on his thigh, and they were just they were running laps at that point. They were just doing different cardio exercises, and basically just making sure they stay fit while they couldn't do any of the specialized fitness working or the game. They were just doing their own thing. Um, in terms of you know relationships within the squad, it looks like he never left. James Batemis said that it's they gave him a bit of a hard time. They were joking around and teasing him a bit in the locker room, but other than that, he's still a valued member of the team. And so I think that if Olivier Renard moves him, he moves him. If Olivier Renard doesn't end up moving him, because it seems like he's in no rush at this point, he's still going to be, a valuable member in the locker room at the very least. I don't know what his usage will be like in terms of play time, in terms of, when it comes off the bench, if he does, or if he starts any games. But it's very clear that his experience and his relationship with a lot of the players has basically remained unaffected. The club is obviously very disappointed with how this all played out. I know that fans feel kind of uh
Betrayed in a way.
disappointed. I don't. I feel like betrayed is a strong word, but I feel like some fans do genuinely feel betrayed. It's like people feel about it varying degrees, right? So if some fans definitely do feel betrayed, other fans feel disappointed. A lot of the people at the club feel disappointed. I don't think they feel betrayed, so to speak, but they're definitely not happy with how this has played out. And but I think that within from player to player, I think this is just part of the way it goes. Yeah, the camaraderie between the players, everyone's in really good spirits, honestly. One thing that I love is that they were close. They got close last season, but I think with the national team, Joel Waterman and Kamal Miller have become best friends, and I love it. You see it on social media, you see it at training too. They're practically holding hands throughout all of training. They've gone to become really good buddies, which is obviously super crucial for people that play along a back line. You've got to be close. James Patemis took a bunch of defenders out for dinner So I think that
Nice.
a defensive line or defensive unit that is on good terms and that gets along well, that's only a recipe for better things to come. But yeah, overall, the camaraderie between the players seems very relaxed. There doesn't seem to be any beef. I mean, obviously, there's people that get along with each other better than others. Obviously, friend
Of
groups
course,
form
but
when
that's
you're
normal.
in
That's
a group
normal.
like that. But it's like every other workplace in the world, right? You get along well with
Yeah,
people, and you tend to stick with the people you get along with. Doesn't mean you don't like other people in the group. It's just that you hit it off and
yeah.
you want to hang out
You
with
stick
them,
with the
right?
yeah,
That's
for sure,
right.
for sure,
So I
for
think
sure. That's
overall,
normal.
spirits are pretty high. It's very competitive. I think especially because, like we said, with the squad depth, people are understanding that I have to fight for my job for the most part. So it's very interesting, especially with a lot of the midfield players, attacking central defensive midfielders. There's a lot of intensity and there's a lot of pressure. We saw a couple, not hard fouls, but you saw that people weren't afraid of throwing the body, sliding into a challenge, and you could sense that kind of intensity. But it's all done with respect. There haven't been any training bust ups. Nobody's confronted one another. There's been no fights or anything like that. So it feels like it's just good, healthy competition, which I think Osada should be loving, and I think that's exactly what they wanted, bringing in that much depth.
That's really exciting. So thank you for first of all, Elias, for answering Chan's question that was
Yeah,
asking about the camaraderie between the players. So you did answer that. Let's talk about some players individually. So first of all, the draftees.
yeah.
There's like three draftees. We talked about it in the last show. Did any one of them impress you? Now that say the week two is under wraps, we can give maybe a clearer opinion even if it's still early for sure. It's just a very early opinion on those three draftees. So Garvanian, Jabang, and Christopherson. Who impressed you?
Jabang has looked right at home, honestly, and he's looking like he's in a very good position to secure that fifth or sixth central defensive spot
Nice.
on the team. Gavanian and Christopherson have had a bit rougher of a go, just because there's Patemis and there's Jonathan Sirois that are the front runners to be 1 and 2 on the team. So I don't know. Maybe he fits in as the third. Maybe he gets sent out on loan. It's possible. And Garvanian has the misfortune of just being stuck in a massive midfield with, like, you
Yeah.
have 8 or 9 midfielders right now that he has to compete with, that all have MLS experience or international experience. So he's in a pretty unfortunate situation in terms of his prospects with the club. um he's most likely going to get sent out on loan. He might go to Florida. He might continue in Florida with the team. um but I don't see him getting any minutes with Montreal this season for sure. Aside from
Oh
like
wow.
a knock on wood, like a catastrophic spell of injuries, and it's not a knock on his quality. It's just more of a knock on. It's more just a statement of just how many midfielders are at the club right now.
Yeah, there
They
are
just have
lots.
so
There are
many that
lots.
I just don't think he'll be able to break in. I think that he gets sent out on loan as well, and I think that's probably the best thing for his development, because right now, for him to waste away on the bench and then just train, you're not going to see much of him, unfortunately. But he's got a good way about him. He carries himself well. He's confident on the ball and he plays hard. So it's all things you want to see in your youth players. But I just think that there's no room for him right now.
It's interesting. Now, let's talk about the new signee,
Yes,
Iliadis. Tell
yes.
me a bit about him. Is he interesting? Did you see anything, even if it's still very early again? Uh, Anything interesting that you can tell us about him?
We talked last week about how he might become this mold of Samuel Piet, and how they might be kind of grooming him to maybe play in that role. And during training, he's shown flashes of doing that. He has he has shown to be a little bit inconsistent with the ball at his feet. He's played some
Oh,
really nice balls and some really interesting plays, and he breaks lines very well. Sometimes he holds on to the ball a little bit too long.
Oh,
right? So
okay.
sometimes he gets caught in possession a little bit,
A bit
but
like
when he
Matko.
makes a
A bit
little
like
bit,
Matko. Okay.
exactly, less, not as far up the pitch as Matko, but in that way, it's happened a couple times. But when he does play the ball, he has a very good vision of the game. He sees the field very well. So when he does let the ball go, it's usually dead on. I still remember this. He played one crossfield ball in the inter squad scrimmage that hit. I believe it hit Romel Kyoto in full flight, and it was a perfect ball. And I still remember it. And it was, it's very impressive, and it shows that like he does see these plays. Sometimes he does get caught in possession a little bit. In terms of winning the ball back, that's where you start to see the comparison to Samuel Piet, where he is like a dog without a bone, and he's hunted players down all across the field, and he's won the ball back. So in terms of his ball winning capacity, it is as advertised. He is very strong, and he's very tenacious on in terms of winning it back. So it's something that, again, either be it off the bench or be it like in a rotational capacity, you will see a significant positive in that way. He just has to be smarter with the ball. But again, that happens with everybody, right? Ismail Kone at the beginning of the season, I wasn't the biggest fan of because of his indecision on the ball, and he tend to get himself into these unfortunate situations. And then by the end of the season, he was brilliant, right? So it's a learning curve. Obviously, he's playing at a different level. He's playing at a different team, so that's hopefully just growing pains. But I've for someone his age and for someone that's supposed to be a project that the club is going to help develop, I see um, a lot of positives.
Oh, that's interesting. Now let's talk about academy players. First of all, the
Yeah,
players that we're expecting to have an impact this year. So let's start with, but let's talk about the two players, in my opinion, that should have an impact this year: Rida Zuhir and, of course, Sean Rea.
yeah.
What did you see about them? Do you think that they're right up there? They are going to be in the rotation, or do you think they still need some work?
I think Sean Ray is
As
definitely
of
going to be
right
in the
now, of
rotation.
course.
As
Sean
based
Rea
on
is
what
going
I
to be.
saw in training, again, based on what I
Uh,
saw in training, Sean Ray is definitely going to be in the rotation. I don't. I still think Matko physically and mentally still has a leg up on him just because of experience and because of age. He just seems like a more well-rounded player to fill in that position. But if you look at some of the flashes with Sean Rea where he beats one or two players and then finds a really nice ball, he, especially in those closed areas, because it wasn't a full field game, they shrunk the field a little bit. He finds these gaps, so he's definitely going to be used this season. Again, this is assuming they don't go out and buy
of
a
course.
10. He's definitely going to be in the rotation. I still think it's Matko's job to lose. Um, in terms of that attacking presence at the edge of the box. But Sean Rea has been very impressive, and it's nice to see that his qualities and his level of play has translated smoothly from CPL. And yes, obviously there's still going to be some adjusting and some growing to do, but he doesn't seem to want to compromise his style of play, and that speaks to someone with a lot of confidence. All right, and you heard it from him last week where he has a lot of confidence and he wants to be a starter on this team. He wants to be a regular fixture on the field, and he plays like it. So he seems to value himself, and he seems to rate his talents very highly. And I think that that's obviously a good starting point for someone his age. And on Rita
Rida
Zuir's
Zuhir.
side, it's much more difficult because there's so many more players. It's kind of the same boat as Garvanyan. He's obviously further up the depth chart, and he's obviously has a better standing in the club. But it's the same thing where he has a pretty significant uphill climb in terms of marking out his territory in the squad. He'll see more minutes than he did before, and he'll have a better standing, I think, in the club. But again, he still has to beat out a decent amount of players for some play time. So I think he might get some rotational minutes. And I think he'll have to make the
Interesting.
most of those. But I didn't see enough to really be like, oh, he's going to
It's
compete
funny.
with other people
It's funny
for this
because
starting position.
last year, when I went to training, because I was at training maybe I think for 3 weeks, like every day,
Mhm.
and Rida Zahir was the one that really showed up. And For me, he was in front of Ishmael Kone. He was in front of Ishmael Kone because he's the one
I
that
think it was too.
started to
Yeah.
get minutes before Ishmael Kone.
Yeah.
And like, wow, seeing him right now struggle to impress at that point in time. Now it's still early in preseason. Very important to know. Very early in preseason, but I expect him to have a role to play this year. So hopefully we'll see that. Let's talk about other players, just as a group.
Mhm.
About those players in the academy. So you have the two players that have signed professional contracts. The three players that have signed a professional contract
Yeah.
with Nathan Dylan Saliba, Jean-Aniel Assi, and of course Jonathan Sirois. And as on the second part, all the invitees
Yes.
from the academy, all the young players like Jefferson Alphonse, Gabriel Antinoro, Loïc Cloutier, Malik Daouda, and Mathis Hebert, the goalkeeper. Uh, Anyone impress you of all those? Do you think that one of them could make the final roster?
One of the things I liked about a lot of the academy invitees is that neither of them looked out of place, like grossly out of place. They didn't look like they were like completely lost, but they also did not. They were exactly at the level that was kind of expected of them, where they did not make any egregious mistakes. They weren't played off the pitch or anything like that, but they also did not impress me or did not really make a mark on any of the competitive segments, right? It's still very early, and we've only seen a handful of actual competitive soccer being played. But in that time, I haven't really seen enough to be like, oh, I think they deserve an extra look, or oh, I think they deserve to come to Florida and spend more time with the camp. I think that they're either going to stick with the academy or be sent out on loan, because right, at least for this season, I don't think that there's much room for them.
Interesting. Interesting. Let's wait and see. Now, talking about form, we talked about form during this pod. Any players that you have a bit of worries, or you look at them and you're like, they're not really fit. I know that there's a lot of talks around Romal Kyoto not being at all fit. Tell me about it, about Romal Kyoto and others.
Yeah, I mean, Jaime Kyoto it has been the biggest name, obviously, especially going with the way Hernan Losada likes to press off the ball, and he demands a very high work rate from everybody on his team. I think that the first person or the first player that people thought of when they heard this was, how's Jaime Kyoto going to react? I think that at the end of the day, this camp is supposed to maybe trim off the last bit of vacation sloppiness and lack of fitness that maybe accumulated over an off season. Different people have different levels of discipline during the off season. I don't want to assume people have just been slacking. I also don't want to assume people have been training Rocky montage style, like in the mountains to get fit. But I can only, talk about what I've seen at training, right? And one of
Yeah,
the
for
biggest
sure.
surprises for me was Lassi Lapalainen, who consistently played 90 minutes last year and who strung 90-minute performances together multiple times. And again, this may be just a one-off thing because I saw him on Monday and he looked normal. I saw him in the first weekend, he looked relatively normal, but on Friday he looked miserable. He looked exhausted. So it might be he's got a bug, it might be, he's not in he maybe he's got a knock. I don't want to speculate. I don't want to, you know, put rumors out there. He did not look in good shape. He was hunched over during the running portions. He was significantly behind. He would be last in the running. So I'm assuming it's some kind of bug because he's also one of the fastest players on the team. Um, but he did not look like he was enjoying his time on Friday. He looked downright miserable.
Right.
So that was one of the players that stuck out to me the most.
Nice. Okay, so good to know. So, Ronald Kyoto, Lassi Lapalainen, you need to step up, my friends. The season is about to come, and yeah, it's gonna be important for you guys to be fit. Chan asking about Toy. if he looks fit. We talked about it a bit earlier, saying that he was playing he was training, solitary with Kai Kamara, so on the sidelines because he took a knock. So no, he's not fit to answer your question, but it doesn't seem like a big thing either. So hopefully,
No, it was just
he'll
some
be ready.
tightness in his leg, right? So it seemed to be more
Exactly.
preventative than anything else.
Exactly. One last question about the training camp, Elias, before we move on. We saw Robert Torkelson play two
Yes.
games with the Iceland national team, two starts with the Iceland national team. Does it make him a possible starter in 2023, in your opinion? Do you feel that he's reached that level where he can have that consistency and he can make a very big impact on that CF Montreal team?
I don't think he's a starter. I just because I think the back line of three is so solidified. But I'm very impressed with the his development. In camp, he looks much better on the ball. It looks like he put on some muscle too, so he looks a lot sturdier. He looks much better on the ball. He's winning shoulder to shoulder battles, and he's muscling people off the ball relatively easily. Um, and he looks like he's in great shape. I think he can genuinely compete with George Campbell for that fourth center back slot, and maybe even give Kamal Miller some rest as that left-footed center back, so he doesn't have to play as many games as he did last year, especially with a new competition and a lot more congestion. He's definitely going to be a more reliable addition off the bench. Again, speaking to his defensive acumen, obviously that still needs to be developed. He's still young, but in terms of getting in better shape, getting bigger, getting better on the ball, he's done all of that from what I can see in training. So that's definitely nice to see, and it's nice to see that the Icelandic national team has noticed that as well, and with the two friendly starts, and hopefully he's also included in the squad for the Euro qualifiers. For those are already done, but for any kind of further national team call ups because he looked really good in training.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun to see his development. Pretty sure he's gonna have a lot more playing time this year, as you said. We do have a question from one of our listeners, Kevin Grumberg. Any thoughts on the lack of announced preseason matches? Haven't seen any listed on the club or league site. I thought I
Yeah,
saw
this is
something.
this
No,
is
am I
this is an
mistaken? No.
annoying thing for me. I didn't see anything either.
Yeah. Okay. I know that
This is
they're
a
going.
very
I'm pretty sure they're gonna play a game against Inter Miami because they're going there. So logically,
yeah. I
we
mean,
could expect a game there.
but what
But
annoys me
yeah,
more about it than anything else is the lack of access we have to it. It was the same thing
uh,
last year. We would get a game report, or we'd get like a description of how of certain events, and then just like like a little 200 word almost like brief on how the game went. And thank you for that, but I'd love to see the team play. I'd love to see what they're kind of doing, what they're kind of experimenting on. I don't want to be surprised on their season opener with like, oh wow, okay, so that's what they're going with. I'd like to have a general idea, right? Because again, we're not in Florida, right? If they were training here all season and then they had the season opener here, at least we could have a general idea of what to expect in the first game. But the reality is they're going to be in Florida for 3 weeks before they play their first game, and we're gonna have no idea how they're gonna line up because I spoke about this with people from the club, and they just can't afford to broadcast it because it costs a couple $1,000s to broadcast a game. So it's very expensive, and I understand that they wouldn't want to spend that kind of money just to broadcast a preseason match. It's a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, like if it's a closed game where people are invited to it, then they want to try out some secret stuff or something like that, then that's their prerogative. They don't we're not they're not obligated to show us preseason stuff. They grant us this access. I'd like to see and get a general idea of how the team's looking before their first game against Miami.
Let's hope. Let's hope the deal with Apple maybe gives us
That's
some
possible,
help
but
with the
I'm not
broadcasts
holding my
of
breath.
friendlies, but yeah, me neither. Me neither. But you never know. Or maybe RDS that will broadcast a few regular games during the season. Maybe they will have some sort of agreement with CF Montreal to maybe broadcast one or two friendlies. Uh, Not holding my breath either, but that could be a
Yeah,
possibility. So, then that's all we have for you, unfortunately. Some good comments from Holy Gale that tells you, Elias, that she loves the training report.
I'm
So
glad you
yeah,
like
so
it.
Eve's not here, but her mom is, so that's perfect.
Hi, Eve's mom.
So so yeah, now let's move on to our next topic is the Canadian women's national team. And because Eve is not here, I'm going to be able to put the segment that she hates. Let's go. Yeah, so Eve, you're not here, man. So it is what it is. So Canadian women's national team, a big news that came out a few days ago. Jade Riviere, the right back of the Canadian national team that just came back from injury, just joined Adriana Leon at Manchester United. I don't know if Paul Vance is
Yeah.
still listening to us. I'm pretty sure he's ecstatic. What a massive first professional contract in your career. How can you explain that? How can you relate to that? Your first professional contract, you're Canadian, like you're way, like far away from England, and your first professional
Yeah.
contract is Manchester United. Please tell me how's the feeling for Jade Riviere?
Oh, I mean, it's got to be amazing, right? The top team or the tied top team in the women's Super League. There's a great title race going on in the women's Super League, by the way. I don't know if you've
Yeah,
been following it, but it's like there's
no, I
four
haven't,
teams right
but
now that
oh
it's
wow,
an unreal title race. Yeah, there's four teams right now that have a very good chance at uh at taking the title, and Manchester United is at the top. So the fact that her first professional contract is going to be at a club of that stature is obviously incredible news, but it's also great in terms of her reputation for national team selection, right? At the end of the day, we've talked about this before on the podcast. National team selection has a lot to do with focusing on, how's this player doing, but also where does this player play, right? Status goes a long way in terms of national team selection, and you're standing within that national team. So the fact that she's right away is being recruited significant after this significant of an injury to play at arguably one of, if not the best women's team in England is a massive seal of approval and a massive, co-sign of her talent. So I'm over the moon for her, and I think that she's going to be learning from some of the best players in the world, and obviously some of the best players in her position. So I think that it's going to be a massive step forward for her.
yeah, it's gonna be nice. Tate Brooks tells us CF Montreal plays against and at Tampa for a preseason
Tampa,
game
okay.
on February 18th at 7:30 game time. So yeah, I was pretty sure I saw something about a game. So yeah, we do have some scarce information, but this is it. Now let's look at it's funny because when you talked about the race in WSL, I went and got the standings. So Manchester United is
Yeah,
first with
look at that.
28 points. Chelsea, is first also with 28 points. Arsenal with 25, and Manchester City with 23. Arsenal with the point with the one last game,
Game in hand.
one
Yeah,
more game to play. So one game in hand. So there could be a tied, like three teams tied for the top. Don't
yeah,
forget that Chelsea has already Buchanan and Jesse Fleming. Manchester United with Leon and Jade Riviere. That's very interesting. I don't think there's any. Oh, there's of
not
course what's her name? The goalkeeper that like this D'Angelo. They just signed with
Yes.
Arsenal.
Oh, it's
So
true. That's true.
also we talked
Forgot about
about
that.
last week. So that's
Yes.
interesting. No more Canadians in City, unfortunately, with Janine Becky coming back
No.
to NWSL with the Thorns last year. So yeah, very interesting. Very happy for Jade Riviere. Uh, how important is it also for the national team to see those players go and play abroad in one of the bigger leagues or the stronger
Yeah. I
leagues?
mean, it's just like seeing the men's team, seeing the women's players recruited to these big teams. It shows that not only are they good enough to be at these teams, the teams want them, and they're willing to go out there, sign them, even after an injury like that. She recovered, and they go out and they sign her. So it's a massive vote of confidence for her, and it's again it just adds lends that much more credibility to the development program that they have going on right now at Canada
Yeah,
Soccer. And you're seeing more and more, you know, members of this national team find teams abroad. They also have some great agents, says Chan. Yeah, they have some great
yeah,
agents, but at the end of the day, if if the player representing isn't up to snuff, then doesn't matter how good of an agent you are, eventually your luck runs out. So they're consistently getting selected for some really great teams, not just in England, but also in Italy at Juve. So
yeah. Grosso giving a
it's
great
really nice to
assist
see.
today, by the way. An amazing assist with Juventus,
Yeah,
Julia Grosso,
yeah,
and she's growing so much with that team. So that's interesting,
yeah.
also. So Elias, it's your time to shine as we're
My
doing
time to shine
social
now?
media. Yeah, it is, it is. So
Yeah.
let's put the segment, and then the floor is all yours to present social media.
Alrighty.
So first tweet, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is Georgi Mihalovic's stats for Azad Alkmaar. He came off the bench around the 30th minute. Yeah, he played just under an hour. And I watched when I saw the tweet that he had come on early, I ended up watching a decent chunk of that game, and he was a rock star. He's playing a bit deeper than what he's used to. You could see now with the ground duels and the recoveries. He's playing a bit more in a box to box capacity over there, but he's just as effective. He's finding a lot of minutes, and his growth is really impressive, just in terms of his maturity and his defensive responsibility. Like in Montreal, sometimes you'd see him not track back as much, or when he did track back, he wasn't as involved in defense. So to see the fact that 6 tackles by any player is massive, let alone a midfielder. 7 recoveries is excellent, right? All these percentages are very solid. And if you're in the midfield, you're less like 81% pass accuracy, 7 for 21 is very strong regardless. So it's nice to see that he's still growing and he's still maturing as a player, and he's adding this facet and this physicality to his game. So I was very happy to see the way he played.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is. So it's a tweet from Giuseppe Campanelli that
Yeah.
tweeted that. He follows a lot former CF Montreal players, so good to see that. So second tweet for you, Elias.
Yeah, this is kind of taking stock of the it's from Henri Gangi Huzic. Sorry if I butchered the name, but it's basically
Alexander,
just
Ganya Rizik, friend of
Alex.
the pod, that came on the pod quite a few times. We love him. Great journalist. So yeah.
It's kind of just
So
taking
yeah.
stock
So
of just how good of a transfer window this has been for Canadian national team players. You've got 4 of them at some of the biggest clubs in Europe, or some of the biggest clubs in the UK. And again, this is just in this window alone, right? So this is a very good indication of where things are going, right? You have interest, just in CF Montreal, Kamal Miller and Joel Waterman both got a lot of interest um, in this offseason as well. So it's very encouraging to see just how many high quality Canadians are being recognized internationally. And I think that, it's only going to continue. We're going to get tweets like this for every single window from here on out, I think, which is such a great revelation.
Okay, so yeah, so Alex says, what a January transfer window for Canadians so far, and we still got 9+ days to go. And all of this is just a small taste of what the summer could look like too. So Jade Riviere with a Manchester United shirt, Alistair Johnson with a Celtic FC shirt, Sabrina D'Angelo with the Arsenal shirt, and of course Ishmael Kone with Watford. He played, I think, a third start in a row for Ishmael Kone. That's really impressing
Yeah.
everybody, same as Alistair Johnston. They're really impressing their fans there. So that's very interesting. Let's move on with the third tweet. It's from our,
Yes.
I'm not going to say friend. I hope that one day we'll be his friends, Fabrizio Romano. So if you don't know Fabrizio Romano, I think you should learn to know Fabrizio Romano
Yeah.
because everything he says is right. So he says, understand that Caroline has chosen to close in with Valladolid after Cadiz and PAOK made official bids. Loan with an obligatory buy option should certain triggers be achieved. The player is traveling in the next hours in order to sign, pending his medical. So Kyle Aaron in Valladolid. I don't. I'm not really sure that playing in La Liga is the right fit for him, to be honest. Again, I'm gonna say it once more. For me, Kyle Aaron should be back in MLS. Uh, Going to play in Valladolid in La Liga is not as interesting. Or you know what? Go back to Turkey and go back to Besiktas. That's where I think he had the best time of his career, and I think that's a lot better for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about how the main reason for him to come back to MLS was his lack of minutes at Bruges, and Valladolid desperately need a striker. They haven't scored a goal in 5 games, so they
Yeah,
desperately need some kind of offensive output. And Kyle Larin going there, it does seem mutually beneficial because he does get his minutes in a top 5 league in Europe, and Valladolid does end up getting a proven goal scorer and a national team member. So I think that this is Larin's chance to really kind of cement himself as a mainstay on the national team if he can kind of get in there and immediately kickstart a Valladolid offense that is not just stagnant, it's basically stalled. And I think that him coming in there is going to be good for him too because it looks like he's going to be, one of the first names on the team sheet, and he'll be looking to maybe add some directness to this team because obviously them and their lack of goals is often, if a team goes this long without scoring a goal, usually it's because they don't have someone like a target man that they can kind of rely on to
but
bring something
but
out of
why not
nothing.
Cadiz? Why not Cadiz? Cadiz is 19th with 12 goals scored in the season, and Valladolid is 18th with 13 goals scored. So it's almost
I
the
think that comes
same.
down
And
to I think that comes down to terms at this point. I think that
but
either team
but
would have a similar reaction and
but
similar
do you
needs.
think?
I just think that's the club negotiating at that point.
Yeah, but if you think about it, he's just going to play the bottom of the table, maybe get two, three chances during the game. He has to. I don't think that's the right fit for him. I disagree. I think that playing. I'm sorry, but Valladolid is going to lose against at least 15 to 16 teams in the Liga, in La Liga. So I don't see Valladolid winning games, even with Kyle Aaron. So I don't know. I think that Kyle Laren is not 35. He's not 33. He's still 27. He still has it should be the prime of his career right now. You don't go and play for a relegation team, even if you're playing in one of the top five leagues. In my opinion, of course, I would love to see him go play in the sixth or the seventh or the eighth league. Go play in Turkey. Go play in Belgium. Go play somewhere where you're going to be able to get minutes, but play the top of the league, or at least play, top eight, top 10. At least you're going to be able to get opportunities. Because right now with Valladolid, how many opportunities is he going to have in a game? Not a lot, not a lot. And if he misses one or two chances, he's again unfortunately he's the one that's pointed out, and I don't think it's a good move. It's my opinion, but we'll see.
It could also come down to the fact that the transfer window is closing, and at this point he might be thinking it's better to go out on loan and play for a relegation side than to sit on the bench at Bruges and not get anything done. So it's very possible at that point that he spoke with the club and said, "Look, I need minutes and I want to play, and just send me wherever you can." And the difference between PAOK and Cadiz and Valladolid is basically just the club negotiating maybe the best deal for them
Yeah,
on the off
yeah.
chance that there's the club does want to end up buying instead of loaning. But I think that it's I agree that in a perfect world he'd be playing at the top of a smaller league rather at the bottom of a big league. But at the end of the day, that might not have been an option, right? They're
But sorry,
based
but
on
go
the
go
rules.
to PAOK. Go to PAOK. Like I think that's a lot better. I think that PAOK is usually is in the top eight. I didn't check the Super League's standing, but yeah, PAOK is third. For me, that's more important that any kind of money right now because you're 27 and you need to prove that you can win, that you can score goals. But again, that's my personal opinion. We don't know what the negotiations are. I just can't understand that move. Let's move on with the next tweet from Tristan Amour, friend of the pod that came quite a few times also on this pod on Mathieu Chouanière telling Olivier Brett yesterday on BPM Sports, so on the radio, that he could fill in for Georgi Mihailovic. It's not that crazy a thought, really. They are different players for sure, with different contexts, but there are still some similarities to draw. Honestly, I read this tweet and I was like, yeah, it's
I didn't
first of
hate
all,
it. Yeah,
it's the natural position of Mathieu Chouanière to play in a number 10. Okay, so he does have the ability to do that. Now, I think that at one point Mathieu Chouanière has to find his position uh, and stick to it. And I think that the coach needs to put him in a position and stick to it too, because now Mathieu Chouanière is not a newbie anymore. He's not a rookie anymore. He's a rotational player for CF Montreal, but he needs to be playing in that same position and to develop, some automatic relationships with his
yeah,
teammates, like in a way where you need to know what Mathieu Chouanière can bring on the pitch. So you want to play him left wing back, you want to play right wing back, you want to play him as central mid, or you want to play him as a number 10. He needs to find his final position. And if it's as a number 10, so be it. But I don't think that he's gonna be first choice before Matko Miljevic. I don't think he's gonna be second choice before Shanrea either. So we'll see. What do you think?
yeah. I think he's a victim of his own versatility in a situation like this.
Yeah,
I think that he's proven to be reliable at wing back. He's proven to be a good player off the bench or on rotation as like an eight or in a double pivot. So I think it's kind of him shooting himself in the foot by being so versatile. He did have moments last year where, especially on the edge of the box, he's been very good with the final
yeah,
ball, or even
yeah.
that shot that nestled right into the side netting. I still remember. I forget who it was against,
The
but
Piatti
to the left
shot.
side of the box. And went exactly. That's what everybody called it, right? And he said that he's been beat by Piatti that way enough times that he learned how to do it, right? So he's definitely more than competent enough to
Yeah,
play at that position. But like you said, I don't think he gets in over Matko, and I don't think that they would compromise Sean Rhea's development, especially because Sean Rhea cannot play in an eight or as a wing back. Sean
yeah,
Rhea can only really play as maybe as a winger, but mostly as a 10. So I don't think
yeah.
that they're willing to compromise Sean Rhea for someone that could play other positions very confidently. He's going to end up being with Ismail Konegan. He's going to be like the third or the fourth choice central midfielder behind Piet and Wanyama. But I think that in terms of moving further up the field, he'll have even less minutes available to him.
Let's wait and see. And last tweet, it's in English. It's in French, sorry, from Jérémy Filosa saying il faut s'attendre à ce que Chinonso Ofor se joigne au groupe de CF Montréal. He translated a bit like if you translated it yourself, Elias. Expect Chinonso Ofor to join CF Montreal group within a few weeks. File to follow. So Jerry
Yeah.
Filosa from IMFC Radio from 98.5 and a lot of stuff. Everybody knows Jeremy Filosa saying that oh 04 should be back. We talked about it a bit in the last couple of episodes. I had the same rumors also. We talked about Belgian newspapers saying that he is coming back, and it seems that he is. Now, with him coming back, do you think we're better up top, or do you think we still need another body?
I think you're bringing in another player with a similar profile to Mason Toy and Kaikamara. I
Yeah,
think that it's a player that is very good in the box and is very good in the air as you saw with his performance in Belgium. But at the end of the day, let's say Kai Kamara leaves and Mason Toy and Romel Kyoto are always a coin flip to see whether or not they're healthy. That still leaves you relatively thin up top. And even if you go with one striker and then two number 10s or two wingers, that alleviates the lack of depth, but it's still an issue, especially if you're going to have condensed fixtures, or instead if you maybe want to make some substitutions off the bench, but you can't because, there are injuries. It leaves you still a bit handcuffed, right? Sunusi Ibrahim is an option off the bench, but it will have to wait and see with how Hernan Losada takes him. It was very clear that Wilfried Nancy towards the end of last season did not rely on him that much. So it is a different kind of profile, a striker profile from what we have up top already, what we've seen up top already in terms of, the big, strong target man. But he'll have to prove that he's the reason that there's no lack of depth, right? He's almost mentioned kind of like a bit as an afterthought last year, and that's kind of permeated into this season. So let's see if he can maybe stake out his corner of that squad list. But again, I think that he really has to up his game and stick to his strong suits a bit more, and that doesn't always translate to what the team wants to do. He's a very direct and a very quick striker, but he's not that good dropping deep playing in the midfield. He's more of a get him behind and for the direct ball, which is not something that Wilfried Nancy was very fond of doing. So his usage this year might also be effective if Hernan Losada plans on playing the same way.
well, let's wait and see what's gonna happen. I think this is gonna close up our episode. Elias, thank you for being
Mhm.
here with me today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great as always.
Yeah, it's always very interesting. I hope you guys liked our episode today on The Ball is Round. I just want to take just a few seconds to say happy birthday to my son who turned two
Birthday.
today. So just yeah, just a small a small thought here for my son. And lastly, guys, if you like our content, if you like what we do have a Patreon page. So feel free to become a member and to participate in order for us to grow our content and to become even more present for sure, and maybe some new stuff that could come along the way. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for listening to us, and see you next week for another episode of The Ball is Round.